Hey guys, welcome back to the Storm channel, and I hope that you are doing great today. And like usual, hopefully I won't be taking away too much time away from your day, and that you can just have it spare some time and watch this video. But yeah, so today we will be talking about a franchise that I haven't talked about on this channel at all, and it is actually one of my favorite franchises, Final Fantasy. But more specifically, today's episode will be about the game Final Fantasy VII Remake, and what's in store for its sequel, Part 2 of the remake. As we know, it's a episodic release, so you know what, let's just dive into what we know. So, well, we know that, like I just said, that the game will be divided into parts. So, right, this video is just going to be talking about like what I'm going to predict and my guesses for this game and like basically what I want to see. So let's take an educated guess on how long each part of Final Fantasy VII Remake will be. So the original Final Fantasy VII consisted of around about I'd say it was 35 hours long, and finally Final Fantasy VII Remake was around about 30 hours long. So mathematically that means it's if the original game lasted around about 35 hours, there will be 7 parts, because if we divide it 7 by since the original Midgar part was 5 hours, yeah, no, that means there will be 7 parts, and I don't think that's going to be very likely. So for a few reasons. For one, people will be worn out after so many releases, and there aren't many franchises that have so many releases that manage to hold people throughout all of it. And secondly, the development team will most likely have changed drastically if it was to be 7 parts, meaning that in terms of how the game will be developed, core philosophies and ideals will change as the team changes. So that debunks there being 7 parts. So what is my guess for how many parts there will be? You know what, I'm going to predict that there will be 4 parts. Part 1 contained the Midgar section, and I'm going to assume Part 2 will be the biggest game of the 4 parts, from Calm, the town Calm, all the way to the City of the Ancients, where you-know-who ends up dying, but that's for later. And will also contain a big open world aspect like the original Final Fantasy VII had. So Part 3 will have less emphasis on Cloud, in my opinion, that's what I'm guessing, and will expand upon the time maybe as Sid as party leader, or maybe someone else in the party. And then there's Part 4. I think Part 4 is going to be the most linear final stretch, and it's going to be expanding the final dungeon against Sephiroth. Many people predicted that there will be only 3 parts because that seems reasonable, but I don't think it is. If we are going by the way they pace the game, a 3-part game will cut a significant amount of content, and we don't want that, do we? But that's the length discussion out of the way, so now for the content of Part 2. So first, I'll talk about a couple of things I'd like to see, and then the no-nos. In Part 2, I predict, well, I really hope for a big open world of sorts like in the original. Part 2 and 3 will contain open world of sorts, with Part 2 being more focused on ground traversal with the broken plane and the buggy thing, whilst Part 3 will have the high wind. So with this traversal, open world can be done right, if they make sure that the world is fleshed out, with the towns being made with more content, but this seems like a huge undertaking. So in the end, I think we might end up having another linear story, but really with the vehicles for traversal, we can do a lot of things, and one of those are side quests. Side quests are massive in the original Final Fantasy VII, and they span across the whole game. The turtle side quest that ends in Wutai, the Wutai side quest with the Turks and Don Corneo, and even more, the Nibelheim Mansion side quest. With an open world function, it would actually encourage players to go out of the way to explore and unearth more of the lore of the world of Gaia. The problem with making these segments compulsory for the story takes away the freedom that the original game had, because also these types of side quests would tower over the side quests in Final Fantasy VII Remake, where we just beat them up and they literally just beat them up and fetch quests. And I'm going to be honest, if we get a quest to fetch cats across the whole world again, I'm going to be done with side quests, but yeah, there is a lot of potential here. Now, what I don't want to see. Well, that's the thing, it depends on what direction they take. If they make it more open world-like, then I don't want to see copy and pasted quests. However, if it is more linear, I don't want them to cut away from us exploring some of the outside smaller settlements in the overworld. Another thing that I don't want them to do, and this might be controversial or a hot take depending on how you view the story of the game, but that is, I don't want them to keep everyone alive. If the game ends with the Temple of the Ancients, we will most likely end with, massive spoiler warning here, Aerith's death, followed by a JENOVA boss fight. Since they are changing up the story with the timelines and stuff, and they kept 4 originally dead characters alive at the end of Part 1, there is a chance that they keep Aerith alive. Aerith's death was essential to the plot for Final Fantasy VII, as it motivated the others to not just fight for and against Sephiroth, but fight for the planet. There are theories from the visions in Part 1 that Tifa actually ends up dying. I mean, that's wild if that actually happens. but I really hope not. That would be devastating, man. Like, but Square kept the Avalanche members alive. Not only that, they brought Zack Fair back from the dead. Like, I don't know, whatever Kingdom Hearts magic Tetsuya Nomura was working, it's just, that's wild. This has quickly turned into, like, the FNAF lore right now. Kingdom Hearts crossover with Five Nights at Freddy's. But because of those changes, they might keep them all alive, and that would take away intensity, tension, and motivation for the story to keep fighting on. So I hope that they stick to at least some really key elements instead of just going all timelines, you know? And you know what? These are my short takes on what could happen in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2. Final Fantasy VII Remake was my personal game of the year in 2020, but has fallen a few places lower in hindsight when I'm looking at the problems and flaws that it actually has, but it's still a solid 9 out of 10. But I'm really excited for Part 2 to drop, so what are you guys' thoughts? Comment what you like to see or don't want to see, and a like and a subscribe all come a long way and are all heavily appreciated. And with that, I'll let you be, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh my goodness, I can't speak. Au revoir, and Storm out.